Hey guys, it's Helen.
And Cathy.
And we are here today bringing you episode 208 of the Heart of the Witch's Path podcast. And we're coming to you today with a little bit more of a subdued, I guess, subject matter than what we've done in the past.
Yes, this is going to be a little bit different. And I guess I would like to warn you ahead of time that this is a kind of heavy topic. So if you don't want to hear about death and dying and grieving, skip it.
Or it's eventual that, people need to deal with death and dying. So maybe you want to strap on your big girl panties, big boy panties, and listen anyhow.
And grab a tissue.
Right. So, unfortunately, it is with a very sad heart that I can say that Cathy lost her dad last week. And so we're not gonna go into like all of the.
Well, I guess
it's kind of
all I want to say is that he was elderly. He had dementia. He was living in a home. He fell. And we decided to go ahead with hip surgery. And a few days after the surgery, he passed away. So I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, although we're going to discuss the morality of things a little bit later.
So, but before we get into that, of course, there's something we must cover first, and that would be the correspondence of the week. So, when Cathy's dad passed, I did some meditational journeying because I wanted to know if there was something that I could do for her. We all know that, when dealing with death, you can't take away someone's grief, but I certainly wanted to know if there was something that I could do to help her process her grief.
Okay, and I just want to throw in there that the last time someone in my family died, I was hysterical, and Helen had to keep me calm. It's not quite like this time.
Right.
But we'll get into that later.
Right. So, I did, like I said, I did some journeying and spoke with Odin Father, and I was given some ingredients and came up with essentially what I'm calling grief incense. I'm not going to tell you the ins and outs of how I create, like the spell words, the words of power that I put together to use it, but I will share with you the ingredients, which are comfrey, calendula, or calendula,
however you want to pronounce it.
However you pronounce it, and yarrow. And so these herbs are intended for, the yarrow gives you courage, the comfrey is for healing, and the calendula is for magical healing concerning the dead and dying. And so those were the herbs that I was given in meditation, and those are, what I found magical uses for. And so I created this grief incense for Cathy, and she can use it not only as an incense, but, in other ways, because
I'll probably make some sort of, maybe a dream pillow or some kind of sachet to keep with me. Mm-hmm. So there'll be various ways that I can use it, and I do appreciate Helen making that for me. So that...
You're very welcome.
...is our...
correspondence of the week. All right, so now that we've, kind of taken care of business, so to speak.
Yeah. Housekeeping.
Oh,
speaking of housekeeping, so I don't know if you're aware, but Helen, with a little kick in the butt, has now been posting our podcasts on iTunes. Mm-hmm. And what's PodOmatic? Is that
PodOmatic?
Okay, PodOmatic and iTunes. So right now she is posting the older episodes, and she's doing 2 a week.
trying to. I think last week I only got one up.
Well, she's trying to.
But
once she gets caught up, then the new ones will go there as well as YouTube.
So that'll be on. We try to keep it like a every other week posting for the podcast, and sometimes we're good at that, and sometimes we're bad.
Sometimes we're not. Well, sometimes you spend a week sitting in the hospital with somebody.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So yes, look for us there. We appreciate your support.
So if you do happen to listen to us on iTunes, please, subscribe, like, comment, and that'll help us out. We really appreciate that.
Right, exactly.
And I'm just in no total way trying to, make you feel guilty because I'm grieving. And please go do this.
Right.
Because if I was going to do that, I'd do a much better job.
Trust me, she would do a much better job.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of course, planned and talked about this prior to recording.
So there's some topics we definitely want to touch upon.
Right. And so I think what I'll try to do is I will try to kind of prompt.
Okay.
And you speak for,
Okay. But the first thing I want to talk about for sure is the ethics, the "and it harm none, do as you will." For those of you who don't know me well, about 13 years ago, I had a brother, one of my brothers, was ill, and we as a family had to decide to take him off life support. And this was almost the same situation. We reached a point where Dad, we knew he was dying, and we had to call in hospice, which, oh my God, the hospice company was like so awesome. So, but to back up just a little before the hospice, when he broke his hip, it was a really bad break, and we could have chosen to not do the surgery because there were a lot of risks. He had stage 4 kidney failure, he had lung issues, he had heart issues. We knew going in that if he had surgery, there was a risk that he wouldn't make it through, or that something would happen afterwards and he just wouldn't last, which is obviously what happened.
Right. He came out of the surgery okay, but of course the couple of days afterward was going to be kind of touchy, and that's basically kind of what happened.
Right. So we could have left him in pain, but had we left him in pain, he would have had to be doped up because he couldn't move, he couldn't shift his legs, and because he had dementia, he was confused as to why he couldn't move his legs. He was confused as to why he hurt. We would tell him, "Dad, you broke your hip." "No, I didn't." "No, I didn't break my hip. I don't know what you're talking about."
Right.
So it was very confusing to him.
Right.
And we knew that if you have hip surgery, then you are in a lot less pain right away.
Right.
So we were hoping, we just kind of tossed the dice on it. We were hoping that the surgery would ease his pain, he would make it through okay, but we knew that if it didn't, it would hopefully be a relatively speedy process, and then he wouldn't be living for months confused and in pain.
So that's why Cathy felt that it was really, really important to talk about the "and it harm none," because of course, "and it harm none" is a philosophy that she lives by because she is a witch, but she is the only person in her family. So that is a point of view that she comes from, that not others in her family come from, and so that's kind of the gravity with which she wanted to talk about this subject.
So obviously, going with the surgery in the end caused him greater harm. It caused his death, but did it cause less harm because it lessened his pain? It shortened his misery. It got rid of his confusion and the dementia and everything. So we as a family, even though my brother and sister are not pagan or Wiccan or they're Christian flat out, we were all in agreement in that we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, at least he's not suffering.
Right. Because he would have been bedridden.
Yes.
He couldn't have even been in a wheelchair.
Right, exactly.
With his condition.
Exactly.
So, and the dementia, there was just a lot of
factors.
A lot of factors that...
Yeah, because we actually, at first, agreed to not do the surgery.
Right.
And then we all slept on it, and we came back and we went,
wait a minute.
This is just really not a good idea.
Right.
So, this is the end harm none. Sometimes you're going to cause harm.
Right.
But which one are you going to cause the least amount of harm?
Right. And that kind of falls to another kind of thought process or adage that people think about when dealing with elderly care, and that is quality versus quantity.
God, yeah. See, that was the huge thing, quality of life.
Right. So quality of life, his quality of life would have been significantly diminished, and quite frankly, I think his safety would have been diminished because of his dementia and because of the
there was the risk of moving him and injuring him further. There was just a lot involved. I'm sorry, I'm getting a blanket. It's cold down here.
So we're recording this podcast in the basement, and if you watch any of our videos, we have recorded some of the top 10s down here, so it's a bit chilly, and so
sorry about that. And then my grandson slept in the basement, and he let my nice blanket that my friend made to me fall behind the couch, so I had to find it.
Right.
So quality of life, yeah, he didn't have any.
Right.
And being in pain like that, he didn't have any quality of life.
Right.
So that was why we made the decision, and that's, a little bit about and harm none.
So why don't we, we're kind of bouncing around on our notes here, and that's fine. Why don't we let's talk about some of the magical things that, kind of happened throughout the process of this.
Right.
So why don't you talk a bit about the hospital ritual that you did?
Yeah. So when my brother died a long time ago, I remember sitting in the hospital room and casting a circle. And I didn't have any tools, and I didn't have anything with me, but I cast a circle of healing, not really that it did much good, but, death in a way is a type of healing.
Exactly.
So,
right.
So this time, I had gone out to, he was in a hospital in Grand Rapids. I had the intention of spending Friday with him as he was healing so that somebody would be there for him.
Right.
And so I had done a short meditation prior to going to bed that night, asking for some sort of guidance on what can I do in the hospital room because you can't light candles. And I really didn't feel comfortable using any kind of oils or sprays because he had some issues with his lungs. And then, what if other people on the floor have allergies?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle for pagans and for pagan clergy who wish to minister to hospital patients.
Right.
And so,
and the other thing too is I didn't want to have this big bag of stones and feathers and everything because first of all, in a hospital room, you basically have the tray that they have for the patient and not a whole lot else. Plus, my brother and sister are not pagan, and I knew that there was a chance my sister at least would come up because she owns her own business and would have been able to come up.
And was in the area.
Yeah, well, she lives about 45 minutes away, where my brother had to work, and he lives an hour or so away. So I knew it wasn't a risk for him, but it was a risk for Teresa. Now I've named my sister, who's not pagan. But whatever.
It's okay. It's
whatever. She knows I'm pagan. I am totally out of the broom closet. But anyway, so in the meditation, I kind of had this vision of Post-it notes with drawings of the elements on them, and so I took with me a pad of small, like inch square Post-it notes. Of course, I have a pen in my purse, and Nala is putting in her 2 cents. Kitty, 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 kitty. You need to shut up now. So I took the pad of Post-it notes, and of course I have a pen, and then I was debating on whether or not to take my turkey feather fan. Well, it's not really a fan because it's one feather, but whatever. But I didn't want to take it because it didn't have a case to keep it in, and again, it's something that's obviously pagan, and so I had a smaller feather. Well, it's not real small. It's
It's a longer feather, but it's
just a single feather.
It's a little more discreet.
Yeah, it's not on a handle and doesn't have dangly things off the end like my turkey feather does.
Right.
So I took that with me, And once I settled in, I took my pen and I drew elemental symbols. I drew flames on one piece. I drew waves on a second piece. I drew a feather on the third piece, and a mountain on for earth. And then I took a fifth piece and I put a pentacle on it. So then, of course, it was fun trying to figure out which way was north. Sometimes the iPhone app is helpful and sometimes not so much. But I stuck the Post-it notes around the room and I put the pentacle one on Dad. And I called upon the goddess. And this is, of course, the time of harvest and reaping. I might get emotional. And I asked the goddess that if this was the time for Dad to be reaped, that it happen quickly.
Now, was this before or after surgery?
This is after surgery. So then we have the horror story about me breaking into tears in the middle of a meeting at work. Yeah. So he fell on Saturday, and we made the decision to have the surgery on Tuesday, and they did it on Wednesday, which of course they only told us as they were taking him into surgery. And my sister sat with him on Thursday, and so I was sitting with him on Friday. So this is 2 days after the surgery. So I asked that if it was his time to be taken, that he be taken quickly so that he didn't suffer. And if it was right and good for him to heal, that it would also happen quickly.
Right.
Because it's not, as much as I would love for my dad to live till I died, it might not be right for him.
Right. Right.
And so, highest good. What's his highest good?
Exactly.
So I asked for that, and I called upon the elements, and, I held the sacred space for several minutes, and I actually didn't let it go, but I did take down my depictions and opened the door, and not to get too much into the misery of the day, but he was having periods of semi-lucidity where he was very upset, and it became clear, the doctors came in, that he was going to pass. I called my siblings, and so this kind of leads into the religion and respecting other people's religion at a time like this. Now, I never actually came out to my dad. I never actually said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not Christian anymore. I'm a pagan. Aren't you glad for me?" Because he would have burned me at the stake. No, not really, but he would have been very upset.
He was very much a religious man. He had his own beliefs. They were Christian in orientation, and so it was just something that you weren't comfortable with.
Yeah. So I wasn't ever going to bring that out to him.
Right. And really our hardcore, witching, let's put it that way. I mean, he's kind of been in a decline for a number of years.
The last 4 or 5 years, yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, we've been practicing for a long time, and we've been studying and things of that nature, but our really hardcore practicing,
right,
feeling comfortable about our witchy skins, so to speak, that's been in about that time.
Well, a little longer, because he hasn't been taking longer. He used to come visit me because he lives an hour and a half away, but he hasn't done that in 10 years or so because he's been uncomfortable with driving.
Right.
So, yeah, it's his decline hasn't allowed him to see the evidence of my paganism. So,
and you knew that it would put a strain on your relationship.
Right, and I didn't.
And so you respected his beliefs and just kind of
left
didn't want to rock the boat, essentially.
Yeah, and let me tell you what, I never came out to my brother either. He only found out because, for some reason, he's my friend on Facebook. And if you're my friend on Facebook, you're I'm pagan.
Right.
Okay? So regardless, I was up at the hospital Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday. Those are my days I was up there. Oh, no, I was there Wednesday, too. I missed half of a work week. Yeah.
Right.
So every day that I was there, I made a point to call the clergy in from the hospital. And why is it the pagan that called in the clergy?
Or thought to call in the clergy?
Yeah, I'm not real clear on that, but whatever. I'm pretty sure that my siblings think that I'm hypocritical because I was the one who said, call in the clergy. I was the one who said to the, so I spoke at the funeral too. So there, and I said stuff about Dad's faith and religion and things, but, and I'm not Christian. And if I was to ever go back to Christianity, all of the hymns I heard over this week would be the way that would make me do it, but no. That and the trip to Shipshewana, but we won't go. If anybody knows what Shipshewana is, it's an Amish community. But anyway, so I made a point to do what I thought Dad would want. Dad would want the Christian clergy to be brought in to pray for him. Right. Dad would want us to pray in a Christian format for him. And I thought that was very important that I not go, well, I'm not Christian, so I'm only call upon the God and Goddess.
I'm only going to do things my way.
Right. Because not that Dad knew, because he didn't know.
But it's the principle. Exactly. And I think it falls upon, I think it's easier for us as pagans, Wiccans, witches, whichever word you choose.
Right.
I think it's easier for us to lapse into that more tolerant viewpoint.
Right, because we can see that it's deity and it's all the same. It's all still deity.
Exactly. We see that aspect of it, is that we see that universal deity that speaks to us one way, but spoke to your dad in a
totally
different way.
Right.
So we see that for the cosmology that it is.
Well, and when I was a child, I saw God that way too.
Right.
I was very religious. I went to church every Sunday with my dad, and I did the teen Bible study or whatever, you know. But as I grew older and I developed past that.
Right. Your mind grew past that. So aside from that, as pagans, we see the persecution of our religion and other religions, and we know the importance of tolerance.
Right.
And we want to act towards others how we would like others to act towards us. We lead by example.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like the point here, is that you lead by example when you respect others' religions.
Right. And it kind of came to a really obvious point when I was the only one there after we had decided that Dad was declining and we needed to call in hospice. But before my siblings got there, I called the clergy in again. And so we prayed for Dad, and then she looked at me, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something about, do you want me to pray with you, or what are your beliefs? And I said, honey, I'm pagan. And I said it just like that. And she was extremely respectful of that. And so I appreciated that.
Right.
And the hospice company that we ended up calling in was not the one that we had picked, because last year we had gone through a period where we thought we'd have to call in hospice. And we had picked a different hospice company, but we ended up with one called Faith Hospice, which was awesome. And of course, very Christian.
Right. If you couldn't tell by the name.
In case you didn't realize. Yeah. So, but the woman was just awesome. And then at the funeral, of course, the preacher Dad had gone to church with for years, and my brother had gone to church with for years. And it's the funny story about this thing is that I have been going to a lot of funerals for aunts and uncles lately, and a cousin, and I come back and I say, man, I am so tired of them pushing hellfire and damnation. I can't believe they just keep doing this. And Helen's like, no, it can't be that bad. Yeah, Helen, it's really that bad. It can't be that bad.
The roomie and I attended Cathy's dad's funeral. And so, we go there, and, we don't need to name names or places or anything like that. But Cathy's dad lived in a pretty rural area.
Blink you miss it town.
Exactly. And so that's where the service was held. And the pastor who did the service was Cathy's dad's pastor.
Right.
So when he was able to continue, to go to service, that was his local pastor. He knew her dad. He went to visit her dad in the adult care facility that he was in, and things. did he come to the hospital?
He did not.
There probably wasn't time.
Yeah, it was.
Things
It was
happened
kind
pretty
of.
quickly.
Yeah, it was kind of quick. And again, it was an hour and a half, about an hour away from where they were.
Right, and so the roomie and I attended the service, and I was really shocked by how the service went. And I don't feel like we necessarily need to name the denomination or anything else because I don't want to point.
I actually think it's non-denominational.
Okay, I don't want to point fingers or anything else. But really, the hellfire and damnation, I was really floored by some of the things that came out of that pastor's mouth.
Yeah, but there were some things he said that I did appreciate.
He did talk a lot about your dad's life, which is something that I appreciated. So that was good to see. And I know that you, as we spoke afterward, you had really said that, there were some family funerals that you'd been to.
Oh, yeah. They just read the obit and then preach. And that's it. And this guy actually knew Dad. And also, I have to say that I never thought that I would be able to speak at a parent's funeral, my parents' funeral. But I actually was able to get up and speak because I had energetic support from Helen Marie.
Yes. So there's two things that there's one other thing I wanted to add. I had a family member that passed and went to a funeral the weekend before Cathy's dad passed. And it was a completely different service. Right. And so I think that's what was so much more eye-opening for me was how much my great uncle's service was all about his life. And there was a little bit about, the church and things like that. But your dad's was very much different.
Well, with that kind of Christianity, you can't talk about someone without talking about their faith in God, their belief in the afterlife, their belief that God is going to bring them home, that there'll be a palace or castle in heaven with streets of gold, and that you can't really talk about their faith without talking about that aspect of their faith,
right? Because that's an integral part of anyone's faith.
Well, yeah, but that type of Christianity, that's right there.
Right, that's in everyday talking kind of thing. And
I think preachers always take the opportunity to try to bring more into the flock, which I think is ridiculous. But I think in the end, this funeral was what Dad would have wanted for his funeral.
That's what he would have wanted.
Right.
So when the roomie and I got there, we saw you pretty much straight away.
Yeah, I saw you
because you were there by the door.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the first things that you said to me was, they want me to speak. Because did the pastor ask you to put some thoughts down?
Well, no, I had put some... Okay, so my previous experience with funerals is you sit down and you write down what you want the pastor to say. You hand it to the pastor incorporates that into what he says.
Right.
And that was a really big part of my brother Bruce's funeral, is we sat in a room, and why is it I am the only one who is like level-headed through the funeral, and then it's like I'm the only one saying Bruce would like this, Bruce would like this, and everybody else is like, yep, she's right,
right.
So I on the way up there, I sat down and I wrote a few thoughts together about what I remembered about Dad, about his faith and how he used to read the Bible at night and how he would teach us about his faith, and about how he had a Model A Ford, and he used to have all the kids in the back of that truck and go up and down the road, and I had two sides of a small piece of paper, and I handed it to the preacher, and I said, can you please talk about this stuff? And he looked at it and he says, well, do you think you can do it? And I'm like, I don't know. And he said, well, why don't you try? And if you can't, I'll read it for you.
Right. So this is what you tell me.
Yeah.
And so I already knew, because it was your dad, I knew that, this was going to be a hard day for you.
Right.
And that's why we came. That's why we were there.
And I appreciate that greatly.
And so, when you said that you were going to speak, I was thinking about Bruce's funeral and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, what can I do to be supportive.
Right.
Energetically, because that's what, as witches, that's what we do.
Yeah, and I think that we have grown a lot in our practice between the time that Bruce died in 2004
Right.
and now.
Right.
I mean, we've had a lot more training. We've had a lot
Exactly.
more knowledge about just cosmology and belief systems and everything else.
Right. So there's a technique that Christopher Penczak talks about during the third year, during that shamanic year, where he talks about feeling dense energy. And the technique is to take that energy and to basically eat it. And not to the point where you get rid of it, because my thought process was I wanted to aid in the grieving process. I don't want to take it away because grief happens. And you need to let that happen. And so that my intention wasn't to take anybody's grief away, but I wanted to maintain the grief energy to such so that you could get through what you wanted to say.
Yeah, and I do have to say that as soon as the preacher started his sermon, the service, whatever sermon, I could feel your energetic support. I could feel it.
Yes, because I did start it from the beginning.
Yeah, I could feel it.
I was in the back of the room.
I was in the front of the room.
Right, and so I maintained that, and at first, you were the only one that was going to speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom and my Aunt Mabel and my brother Tom had mentioned that they wanted to speak as well.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So my intention was to get you through your portion.
Right.
And then when your brother stepped up, I was like, okay, we need to keep this going. I need to continue this eating of the dense energy and returning it to the Mother Earth. I need to keep that going because, he deserves to make it through what he wants to say too.
Right.
And then when your sister got up, I did the same thing for her.
I never would have thought she'd get up.
Right. She tends to be the most emotional of the three of you. And so, yes, that was my intention, was not to take away anything completely, but to keep that at a level that you could get through.
Right.
That you could maintain, that you could do what you needed to do. And
I did.
I'm glad it was helpful.
It was.
Yeah. So, right. So that was, that's another magical thing that as witches we can do.
Yeah.
When in any kind of situation like that,
so
heavy.
Along those lines too, when I first got up to the podium, I really felt like I was going to lose it. In fact, I made some kind of crack to the preacher as I was walking across the room. He said something about she has some thoughts she wants to share. And I said something about, or you're going to read that and I'm going to stand there crying.
Right.
So, yeah. Right. So I had to take a minute to ground and center and really, you don't want to suppress your grief, but I had to control it long enough to be able to say what needed to be said. Mm-hmm. So, so that was a technique. And I used that a lot while I was in the hospital room because, from the time I got to the hospital about 9:00 until about 3, things were pretty stressful with Dad until hospice drugs were involved and they were able to get him to a point where he wasn't in pain and he wasn't confused. Mm-hmm. And that, however many hours that was a lot of stress.
Right.
And I did a lot of grounding and centering and trying to,
just kind of maintain that kind of energy in that space.
And to keep the room as clear as possible with positive energy and healing energy, because again, dying is a part of healing too.
Right.
So so I used it throughout that whole experience. Mm-hmm. And it really helped. So if you feel like you have like social anxiety speaking public, or you don't think you're going to get through an experience, I would absolutely recommend to do grounding and centering techniques. Learn them. Learn about eating the dense energy. Learn about finding techniques to keep yourself on an even keel, because that has helped me so much. Right.
It's all about balance.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Randy today while we were driving about how the learning Wicca has really helped me come out stronger as a person and get a lot more self-confidence in everything I do. And that really helped me through this whole, it's been a week,
Right.
So,
and I mean, your dad's condition has not been optimal
no.
for a few years.
It's been, he's had dementia, and my sister and I actually had to get custody of him a couple years ago. I think I mentioned this before in a podcast where his wife tried to kill him. And so it's probably been 3 or 4 years that his dementia has been such where we're not sure he knows us when he sees us. And sometimes we're sure he doesn't know us when we see us.
Right.
And that's not a good quality of life.
Right.
Which
Exactly.
we're back to that again.
Exactly. Okay, so why don't we kind of wrap things up? Because
Did we talk about everything?
There's only one thing that we haven't talked about, and that's our thoughts on the afterlife. So
there's a lot of different theories about this, and everything from the atheist view where you die and that's it. The Christian's view where my mother keeps telling me, you lay in the ground and you don't really do anything until Jesus comes back and then he calls everyone home. And yes, I'm saying this in a sing-song voice, but my mother keeps trying to convert me. I'm not really sure why she's doing this. It's driving me crazy. To your entire being dies and is born again as either another person or an animal or whatever, depending on your karma. Helen and I have done a lot of shamanic learning. And you want to talk about the threefold soul?
So, I see myself as having a 3-part soul.
Right.
That because the cosmology that I believe in is a model of the world tree where we have the upper, middle, and lower worlds. I believe that my soul has 3 parts as well. And so the upper soul, the upper world soul, is that connection, that piece of the divine mind that is part of me. And then the lower world soul is that connection to my ancestors. And what comes from having that relationship with them. And then the middle world soul is me, Helen, right now. And so I am the middle world soul, and I am the linchpin that holds the 2 souls together.
3 souls.
Well, I am the 3rd.
2 souls, yeah.
And so when Helen passes, that then the divine mind will go back, the part of the ancestors will go back, and it's been explained that Helen goes down to the underworld for a time and then might cycle back up through to the upper realm and then essentially reincarnated, at a point as someone else. And becomes another middle world
with
soul.
Not necessarily the same upper and lower world parts.
Right.
But that same middle world part.
Exactly.
And Helen kept saying she believes because she doesn't want to impose her beliefs on me, but this is also my cosmology.
Right.
And that doesn't have to be your cosmology. It doesn't have to be anybody else's. This is what we've been taught, and it rings true to us.
It resonates with us.
I was just going to say that.
The girls love for us to say.
It resonates within us. So while we're using the word resonate, this cosmology of the 3-part soul resonates with us. The Christians' cosmology of their soul that waits for Jesus to come back resonates with them. And I don't really know enough about any other religions to speak to what they believe in, but you have to be true to what is in your heart. You have to be true to what resonates with you.
Right.
And not everybody is going to understand that, and not everybody is going to believe the same as you, but by the same token, you have to respect what other people believe.
Right.
Especially when you're in a stressful situation like my siblings and I were this last week, where their belief system is completely different than mine. And I had to respect that, and I didn't want to impose my belief system on them, so I just didn't bring it up.
Right. You dealt with it in your own way.
I dealt with it internally. I dealt with it when they weren't there.
Right.
I called Helen and said, I need your help.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's stressful enough in a situation like that without everybody bitching about their religion.
Right. Right. So, in closing, Cathy has found something that, a quote that she would like to share.
Yeah, so I want to preface this a little bit by saying that while I firmly believe that my father is in a better place, he's free of dementia, he's free of pain, he's free of confusion, he is wherever souls go after death. And I am happy for him because he is free. And I know that it's a cycle of life, and I know that everyone is going to die just like everyone lives. And I can accept that, but I will miss him. And I will grieve for him because that's also natural and normal. I'm not going to let it control my life, but I'm going to grieve for him. And a few days before he passed, I came across an article, which I think I shared on my Facebook page, but I now can't remember what the article was. However, the author was B.J. Miller, and there is a passage that I'd like to read here. There are mountains of sorrow that cannot move, and one way or another, we will all kneel there.
And I think that that's a really powerful way to kind of wrap up this podcast. Again, we know that this is...
It's a little longer than what we usually do.
It's a little longer. It's a little heavier subject matter than what we normally do. And that's okay. It's okay to do that, you know, as situations and life happens and things of that nature.
Just happened to be a really good opportunity for us to talk about some death magic and some ways to deal with death and dying magically.
Right.
And, sorry guys, it's also a way to help me with my grief. So here I am shamelessly saying thank you for allowing me to discuss this topic in a way that was good for me. And I thank you. And I hope it helps you guys. I hope that it helps to ease you if you are feeling sorrow over a loved one. I hope that it helps you in the future when someone passes. And if you have any questions or want to talk further about it, feel free to email the Heart of the Witch's Path email, and Helen will pass that along to me. And if you want, we can discuss.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we hope that that you got something out of this. If you have, please, give us some kind of feedback, whether it be a like, whether it be a subscribe, whether it be a comment. We encourage all of those things, whether it be an email.
Or you could, if you know someone that could benefit from this talk, you could share it with your friends.
Right. So that's going to wrap it up for us. Again, thank you for taking a walk with us for a little while on the path. And until next time, blessed be.